Our moderator for today's session is Bill Varvaris. Bill is a board member with RPIC, as well as the Director General for Real Property and Environmental Management at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Bill started his professional employment as a policy advisor to the Minister of Natural Resources Canada and reached the post of Chief of Staff to the Minister of Industry. In 2006, Bill commenced his career in the Federal Civil Service at Public Works and Government Services Canada in the Real Property branch, where he held several positions in both the strategic planning, administration and renewal, and the portfolio management sectors before making the move into his current role. Bill, thank you for leading today's discussion. Over to you.
You're still muted, Bill.
Mute. Thanks. Sorry about that. I think that will be the term of the decade. You are muted, or you are on mute. I hear that about 15 times a day. Thank you, Ashley. I was just trying to see how many participants we have at this moment in time. I think we're around 20, 25. And I guess we can start. All right. Hi, as Ashley mentioned, my name is Bill Varvaris. I'm Director General for Real Property and Environmental Management from Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So welcome to the second RPIC free online event with a focus on the current pandemic and corporate real estate. So today's event concentrates really on contingency planning for asset management. As many of you know, the visibility of asset management functions is at an all-time high with the COVID pandemic. And as a frontline service, asset management starts with knowing what physical assets and the organization holds, where those resources are located, and how they all fit within your organization, your organization's business, operations, and workforce. When that information is known and it's quantified in a portfolio strategy, asset managers can quickly identify asset portfolio segments that house critical functions and ensure a higher level of maintenance standards to guarantee continuity of operations. It's important to immediately assess and bolster business continuity plans. And I think that's what our presenters will be talking about today. So we can build up capabilities both now and in anticipation of recovery. So most organizations already have business continuity plans, but those may not fully address the fast-moving and unknown variables of an outbreak like the current one, like the COVID-19 outbreak. Typical contingency plans, as we found out quickly enough, don't generally take into account the widespread quarantines, the business and community disruptions, and the added travel restrictions of global health emergencies like this one, which have an impact on our ability to manage our assets. So it is extremely important to really take precautionary measures and stress test your business continuity and recovery plans. So if you have not done so yet, I would highly recommend implementing a crisis planning preparation, if you like. Also, be very mindful of your people and their immediate needs and concerns when developing scenarios and plans for business disruption and resumptions. Once you've reassessed, it is necessary to communicate those plans and all contingencies clearly to key internal and external stakeholders to promote trust and transparency. I think for the government of Canada, what we did initially was really carefully monitor our third-party service provider arrangements, identify which ones have been impacted, and really deal with issues that they were facing as well. So I would highly recommend reviewing your SLAs, your service level agreements with your key service providers. And I always like to end something with a Churchill quote. Winston Churchill, I'm a huge fan, once said, "Never ever let a good crisis go to waste." And I think it's important to keep in mind that the crisis could present some really good opportunities for organizations to really transform and excel. As the dust settles, asset managers may also use this opportunity to shore up their core processes or really consider how to better manage them, and for now and also for the future. So for some organizations, the COVID-19 crisis may highlight some issues that have needed attention for a while, but could no longer wait. So this is a really good opportunity for some organizations out there. So as you know, we have two presenters with us today. We have Bernard Gaudreau and we have Mathieu Gauthier. Welcome. Bernard Gaudreau is one of the founding members of the Canadian chapter of the Institute of Asset Management, IAM, from which he holds a certification. His expertise is recognized across Canada, namely due to his acquired technical depth, practical experience, and methodical approach. Bernard launched Planifica, spelled with a K, in 2005, a company that has grown into a multidisciplinary consulting firm specialized in asset management, and that includes a large client base from the public sector as well. Mathieu Gauthier is from the St. Lawrence Seaway. Mathieu Gauthier is a senior engineer who obtained his BEng from Université de Sherbrooke and his MBA from HEC, from Université de Montréal. He joined the St. Lawrence Seaway in 2014 after nearly 10 years in industry. He presently manages the planning, budgeting, coordination of engineering work and infrastructures, as well as the implementation of health, safety, and environmental standards. He also provides leadership and supervision to engineering and technical staff. So without any further ado, I will pass this virtual microphone to Bernard, and I hope that was the 3 minutes I was allotted. I usually go over, and I probably have, and I'm going over right now even more, so I'll stop. Bernard, it's up to you.
Thank you, Bill. I will start sharing my screen, guys. Here it is. You see my screen?
Yes.
So good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to the west side of Canada. So today we'll discuss two parts of the presentation. One, Plan A, where I will make a presentation about asset management and an asset management system, and Mathieu will show you how they have implemented their asset management system at the St. Lawrence Seaway. And this Plan A is about how more robust your Plan A is, the less Plan B you will need to have in place, or robust your Plan A is, the more your Plan B will be easier to be in place in. And the Plan B is about resilience in this pandemic era. So I will have a little presentation about key principles there, and what Mathieu will show us is what they have implemented in this pandemic situation at the St. Lawrence Seaway. So the topic we want to discuss is resilience in this pandemic era, and resilience is part of the process of asset management. And if one or more of those statements, do I repair? I have a lot of data. How do I sort this data so I can make decisions? How am I faced with how do I manage risk? How do I go get the buy-in from my C-suite? How do I convince? How much I take into consideration the whole life cost? How do I prioritize those projects? How much investment do we need? So if one or those statements seem familiar, then the discipline of asset management should be a worldwide investment of your time today. And the more robust your asset management system is, the more resilient you will be. And that's the key message today. We will see with Mathieu, and this is possible. So what is asset management? Actually, asset management is a management philosophy. Based on the ISO definition, asset management should be the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from asset. So it involves balancing cost, risk, and performance. Asset management brings a different approach and a way of thinking and transformation of organizational alignment and culture. And we want to solve business problems with engineering. So we want to bring business into engineering and engineering into the business world. So it's about not only the assets, but it's about the process of managing the assets and the people that does it. That's what it's all about asset management. How does it start at asset management? Actually, first in the 80s on the Australian and New Zealand side, where they had a very economic tough times there. Level of service went down. They had problem with budget allocation. So the first ignition of asset management started there. And at the same time, in the UK, where a lot of the oil price crashed in the 80s, some catastrophic event happened in 1988. And this is how it's started with the regularity. Regulators have asked to assess asset integrity of all platform because of this catastrophic failure of actually Piper Alpha in 88. And this is why we use now in the term of asset management, what is your burning platform to start your asset management journey? And actually you will see Mathieu use this term in the start of their journey. So other constraints started also with utilities and public transportation in the mid-90s in UK, where again the level of service went down and the asset condition went down also. So with a bunch of motivated engineers started to ride the PAS 55 in a pub. And this was the early birth of the Institute of Asset Management. Asset management is not managing assets. So it's not only managing assets. So we want to make the case that asset management is more than managing assets. So it's not only maintenance, it's not only projects, it's not only for engineers or finance people. It's not for accounting exercise as well. It's really a management philosophy where we want to bring, a corporate alignment from the business plan and the business perspective, where you align all the group from the assets for the line of sight to maximize value and produce value to the organization, again, balancing risk, cost, and performance. And a main point also, whole life cost, of the assets. A lot of time we focus on construction, but it represents only 20% of the whole life cycle cost of the assets. So it's really important to consider life cycle costs on this perspective. And again, asset management is really the management philosophy to break down silos in your organization to make sure that we create value again around the company. So why is it important, asset management? Modern society is heavily reliant on physical asset now in order to function effectively. Asset management manage assets so they can provide product and services now and also have the perspective into the future. It's important to mitigate business risks, as you can see, and also you need to require the understanding and support of internal and external stakeholders, such as shareholders, regulators, and those stakeholders may wish to exert influence, you know, on your strategy. Asset management is delivered by cross-functional teams at all levels of the organization, from senior leadership teams to business professionals and personnel who undertake also asset management activities. What drives the implementation of a good plan A in asset management? As we mentioned, asset management, you need to put in place a very robust system in place, trying to optimize the life cycle cost of your assets. Also looking forward to improve operating performance of your asset, you know, by reducing failure rates, increasing availability, also reducing safety risk of operating of assets, and of course, sustainability and improvement for the reputation of the organization. So that makes you the plan A in place that drives, you know, the asset management journey. And talking about the journey, asset management is not a project, you know, it's a continuous improvement process. It never ends. So it's important that you understand that it's a journey, and if you look to perfection at first and stop you from starting, then you need to try to other strategies, because if you better to start with imperfection and then, you know, you go on the journey, and it takes time to be mature in asset management. It's a philosophy of management. It touches all the organization. It takes time. So the process in place, the IAM and the ISO organization have, like I said before, back in the pub, the foundation of the IAM, the first founders has written the PAS 55, and actually the PAS 55 evolved to ISO 55000 in 2014. So it's quite still new, and the ISO certification is ISO 55001. So the Institute of Asset Management has tried to develop a framework that is more digestible, if I can say, for organization to implement asset management into your day-to-day operation. So what they have done is they have developed a framework where you have 6 themes of thematics. Excuse my Franglish word sometimes. So 6 thematics focusing on, you know, make sure the alignment of your asset management system, which is here, from your external and business orientation, which are in gray here. So you have all the external constraints that align your strategic plan from your organization, and this is where you align your asset management system to support your organizational strategic plan. So 16, strategy and planning, asset decision making, how you prioritize your investment, life cycle delivery, how you operate, maintain, acquire, dispose your assets. Of course, as I mentioned, people do asset management, so governance, you know, development of competencies, leadership, culture, asset information. So how do you support decision with asset enablers from software, data, and on the left, on the right side, risk and review. So how you make sure you evolve, you control, and you monitor performance of your asset management system. A good way to start to measure this performance of your asset management system is to conduct an asset management maturity assessment. There is 6 levels from the IAM that they have developed the maturity guideline principle, where it starts from innocent here in the bow tie effect, where we see here organization usually more in silos, and as more you evolve into maturity, the more flow, the more efficiencies you get and performance you get. Usually initial review start between the stages of being aware and developing stage. This is a really powerful tool to communicate in your organization where you are from your journey in asset management and where you want to be, what's the future states, and what's the plan to get there. And that's a very good way to build on a robust plan A, and this will help you see for the next steps. So any questions for now? On the poll and the question Q&A.
Hi, Bernard. We did have one question come in, so I'll read that out for you to answer.
Okay.
On the topic of resilience, have any of the presenters begun to incorporate resilience to climate change in their asset management techniques?
I've seen on my side, and Mathieu, you can complete me after that. Yes, a lot of resilience and climate change impact is really tied together. So a lot of customers now have in their resiliencies analysis, one of the key component is climate change impact. Mathieu, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really pertinent for our organization. In fact, because we have to manage the water level, especially in the wetland canals, so we do have an impact. In fact, right now we have a very high flow in the St. Lawrence Seaway, and that's a direct impact of well, some would say that's a direct impact from the climate change. Others could say that's not the case. But anyway, the case is that we have higher flow than usual, and that impact the maintenance of the assets, but as well the way we operate the canal. I can think of also of the ice. So we are navigating up to close to end of December. So in the late, I would say the past 10 years, we saw a change in the timing of the ice formation, which is sooner than usual, which is counterintuitive compared to the climate change. But in fact, that's a possible impact of the climate change. So we have to build our infrastructure or the future projects that we are developing, considering that we may have some more ice, higher water level, and other impacts. So it's not directly completely managed at that time, but that's a consideration that we take for the future, for sure.
Okay, thanks. And since we're going a little bit short on the time frame here, I forgot to brought the poll from where you are in your journey before going to Mathieu. So is Ashley, can you pull the poll to see where you are on your asset management journey right now? Okay. Do we have the results? So mainly we manage asset, but don't do yet asset management, and we started quite tight there. So pretty much started at the early stage of the asset management journey. Interesting. So we will see how this journey can be implemented. And Mathieu, it's all about you now.
Right, thank you. So I will go quickly through the slides. You will see there's a lot of information, but again, feel free to contact maybe after the webinar if you have more questions, because we don't have that much time during the lunch. But however, I provide a lot of details. So just at a very high level, the St. Lawrence Seaway system, in terms of locating it, it extends from the Atlantic Ocean up to the Great Lakes. That's obviously an important piece for the economic activity for the Canada and for the US as well. And the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, specifically, which is also known as SLSMC, the corporation for which I work. We have the mandate to maintain and operate all the locks between Montreal and the second Great Lake, Lake Erie. So there's two sectors, the Montreal to Lake Ontario sector, and we also have what we call the Welland Canal, which is between the first two Great Lakes, Ontario and Erie. Next slide, please. So the type of asset that we manage at the SLSMC. So let's start with the number of assets. We have more than 3,000 assets that we manage for the government of Canada. And it's a big variety of assets. So obviously we have locks, as you can see on the right, and mobile bridges. So we are the Canada is the biggest owner of bridges of mobile bridges via the St. Lawrence Seaway, and there's 18 that are managed by the St. Lawrence Seaway, the SLSMC per se. Another important point to take into consideration: the Welland Canal was put in service in 1932. So that means that we have assets that are almost 90 years old. So obviously, when Bernard was talking about taking the whole life of asset into consideration, when we do rehabilitation, that's very important, because our asset has to be extended in terms of life. Next slide, please. So the journey, how it started with the Seaway. So Bernard also referred to that. We had our own burning platform at the St. Lawrence Seaway. It happens in the late 80s, and it's basically a mobile bridge that jammed, not able to operate because of a lack of maintenance. And we also have had a slabbing at the bottom of one lock. So again, two major incidents that lead to a lot of days of closure and a big impact in terms of loss of economic activity. So that was our burning platform to develop what we've called at that time in 1994 the Infrastructure Management Support System, or also known as IMSS. So that's basically a framework. So at that time, the framework of IAM was not existing. So we developed a kind of a internal homemade framework for the asset management, and we also developed a software that supported, so an internal software. So next, okay. So that again, to support that system, one thing that is very important, and I think that made the success of our system internally, is we have a dedicated team which is called the infrastructure team. The team that I manage, in fact, so that team is dedicated to support or to execute all the IMSS processes, which includes the inspection, the assessment, the planning, and everything. So we lead that effort each year, and we do that with again, very important, a close collaboration with engineering, maintenance, operation, and even other departments like business development. On the right, you see at very high level, again, what is our asset management system internally. So I will go through each of those steps at very high level to give you an idea of how we apply the asset management internally. So the very first step, again, and that's mandatory if you want to manage assets, you have to know the asset. So the very first step is to do the inspection. The goal of those inspections is to assess the condition of the asset and to assess the performance as well of the asset. So it's not just with an eye of thinking about the maintenance, it's also thinking about how the asset perform in terms of is it in good performance state or a bad performance states. There's also a goal of establishing the deterioration rate trending. And the goal of it is to try to forecast in advance. As you can figure, 3,000 assets with a very high value. So we cannot decide to maintain only when it's broken. So we have to forecast in advance when we will invest in the asset. So that's one also concern when we do the inspection. To the next slide, you will see that, so the second step, you may switch the slide, Bernard. So the second step of that process is to do the assessment. So we just did the inspection, we know the asset, how it is and what kind of condition it is, but then we have to provide an assessment rating for each of those 3,000 assets. So that means that's a kind of a reliability level, if you want to say, or a probability that asset will fail during the next years. So each year we review each of the assets to reassess or readjust the assessment of the performance if need be. And again, it's done with inspection, engineering, and maintenance, because you may have information that are not available visually, but that the operation could provide you, like the performance is lower than usual or that kind of stuff. Another important element is we have a degree of certainty. So let's say that we have a very good rating for an asset, but we did not inspect it for 10 years. So you will have a good rating, but you will have a very low degree of certainty. So it's not just to have a rating for the asset on the performance, but also to be sure of that rating. So that is the degree of certainty that we assign for each of the assets. On the next slide, we talk about, so we have the assessment for each of those assets. And we also have for each asset what we call the risk index, which is basically a profile. So let's say that you have a failure for a specific asset. What are the consequences to the safety of people, the navigation interruption, that kind of stuff. So we have a process for each type of asset. And basically we apply a very simple formula that is the probability of failure for this asset multiplied by the consequences of a failure. And then that provides you a risk. So the equation is a little bit more complicated, but the concept is the same for any risk that you want to assess. So that will provide you the risk exposure. So if you sum up all the risk for each asset, you have a risk profile for the corporation. So we know how many we want to invest in the asset. We have to establish that. We have a risk exposure. And we also have another indices, which is the system availability during the year, which is basically the performance. So what we are trying to do with each year and that we report to the board is basically balancing how many dollars we want to invest to balance an acceptable risk and an acceptable system performance. And that's what it is. You don't need a zero risk, but you need really to balance to the risk with the dollars and performance. After that, we did that. So now we have the other important component, it's the planning for the future. So internally in our system for each asset, again, each of the 3,000 assets, we have a series of recommendations for the future. So each year we are trying to look in advance what we will need to invest for a specific asset. The time range for the intervention is up to 40 years. the cost certainty is low for those potential projects, but at least you have a kind of idea for the whole system, how many dollars that you will have to invest for the future. And that's important because that we're talking about big dollars that cannot be invested all at the same time. So you're able to kind of flat out the curve of investment over time with that system. That's for the long-term planning. And then we also, after that, have the short-term planning on the next slide, which is basically the creation of the projects. So those projects are created for 1 to 3 years. So that's why we call that a short-term up to mid-term planning. Those are mainly based on the long-term recommendation. The projects are created when they are required, but they can also be created, those projects, by engineering, maintenance, and operation, and even other departments. And a very important component on the estimation or preparation of each project is that we have a business requirement analysis with all of the stakeholders. So it's not just a maintenance project. There's also a component of how we could improve a specific asset to better serve the performance to operation or the needs of the business development department. So that's taken into consideration for each projects. Then on the next slide, we just created all the projects or the portfolio of projects for the next 1 to 3 years. So each year we are doing an effort led by our department, but with the collaboration of other departments, we prioritize a project. We try to rank the project on a priority, with a priority level, basically. That gives you a kind of example of what is taken into account, basically the risk reduction, the cost avoidance of executing projects, but also the non-tangible benefits. And that's where our IMSS software just intervene. We have a weight for each of those factors. We crunch them and we extract what we call a benefit to cost ratio, which gives you a way to prioritize the projects, but based on an objective assessment of those projects. On the next slide, you have that's the project. It's the flowchart for prioritization of project itself. But the message here is just to give you an idea of with that flowchart, which is very well documented for each participant, that provides consistency and objective analysis for each of the projects. So that way it assures that over time you don't have a project that passes with, because that's what I used to call a pet project for someone, and the year after you don't have that kind of project. So it's not the case. I mean, if I'm not there or my team is not there tomorrow, we're able to reassess the project and having approximately the same results. And ultimately that's the goal, to be consistent over time. A quick mention at the project execution, but basically we have a corporate project manual, but it's very important. We reinforce that notion for our engineer is to take into account the maintenance and operation during the asset life, the complete asset life, since they are designed to last for like 30, 40 years. So that's very important for the global cost. And then that slide, I could have called it takeaways for a success of our system. Corporate commitment is a key. So it's the case for the St. Lawrence Seaway. They know very much our system, the IMSS framework, and they support it, which is very important. All departments must contribute. So we need the participation from department like operation and maintenance for sure. And structured process which assure consistency and objectivity in the decision on which project you want to prioritize.
Any question for Matthew from the audience? Bill?
Any questions? I haven't seen any. Have you seen any questions, Ashley?
So I have
If
one
not,
here.
I have a question. You do?
You
I
go
also
right
have
ahead.
a question, but go ahead. Should I
Okay.
go right ahead?
Yes.
Matthew, you're referring to IMSS, your information management system or asset management system. How do you, and I think it was developed back in 95 or mid 90s. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yeah, 94.
Yeah. So how do you manage using an older asset management system while trying to integrate new functions for the future? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in fact, that's very important to make a clear distinction between the software, which is supporting calculation for the projects, and the framework. So IMSS framework, Bernard referred to it in his portion, that's always evolving. So we had a framework defined in 94, but that framework continued to evolve all along those years. So it's not exactly the same. So the value, even the values on what we take the decision to prioritize the projects were redefined each 10 years. So twice during, since we created IMSS. And that's very important because you have, and you will see that in the second portion, but you have to adjust your system to make sure it always reflect the new values or like what is important today, which might not be the case in the past. So it's still evolving. Okay. It's never perfect and never finished, but we try to evolve along the way.
All right, good, thanks. Any other questions, Ashley, from the audience? No? All right. We'll continue with the presentation.
So, as we mentioned, a robust plan A helps you be more resilient. And in this pandemic situation, when it comes to resilience, the debate is often whether it's better to resist the failure of an asset system at all costs or to suffer the impact of the failure, but to recover quickly. The arguments are good to be made on each side, but this is how we're going to see with the theory in Mathieu on how to balance this we over redundancy our assets, or we try to be better at recovering from a failure. The key principle in resilience, 7 steps, which I will emphasize on today. If we start with the organizational context and strategy, so what's the importance here to identify what are the threats to the organization, what are the acceptable disruption and level of resilience we need. So this is important to identify also. Critical points of assets of the organization. What are the critical assets to make sure the service is delivered? What are the risk, vulnerability, and the impact of those failures? So impact assessment. Again, as Bill mentioned, contingency planning, response and recovery, and then testing those tests and validation for continual improvement. So really the key principle is to make sure that we can avoid or we can recover, and the time factor is really important. So if I go into the organizational context and strategy, loss of function may impact any of these areas, but it's very important to in different ways. So resilience analysis needs to consider restoration of these impacts and constitute an acceptable level of recovery. So each value system may have a different scale for the same threat because value is perceived by the stakeholders. But likelihood of threat occurring and the impact on the organization as a result of the said threat occurring will help the organization determine best approach to prevent the occurrence and minimize any adverse effect should the threat become realized. So it's important to map this and to see what are the impacts. A good way also in a pandemic situation, we have less people, less time. We don't want to target what are our critical assets. A lot of you guys in the RPIC association manage facilities, so I'm pretty sure you're all aware of the FCI, but a good way to identify critical asset is to put in a API in place, so asset priority index. And this is where you can help you make identification of where are your critical points and what are the critical assets to your organization. The other element of the key principle is vulnerability and impact assessment. Resilient analysis identify activities and objective, quantifies impact of a disruption, and then and informs appropriate response and strategies and priorities. Resilience organizations are forward-thinking, willing to take manage risk, and adaptable. Resilience is not an outcome itself, but an organization characteristic that can be developed. So resilience analysis is synonymous with business impact assessment, vulnerability, and system availability. So this is your process. Those are the variables that can affect, you know, the assets. The question mentioned before is climate change could be or more and more integrated into those analyses. Clearly, it is a variable in the process. The other part of the key principle is recovery and response, or response and recovery. 4-stage: prepare, mitigate, respond, recover here. And this is where it's all about, you know, duration of the impact and magnitude of impact. So as you prepare for and you're better at resilience, this is where you have the more effect on your system. And the time factor, which we've seen, this is where it's really important to have test those constraints and do testing on your process. So the duration of impact is always limited to the maximum in your organization. So just a quick poll here to see how much resilience ready are you from your point of view and your organization? Okay, is the results coming in? Oh, pretty much. Very good. You're good students there. So pretty much prepared. Bounce back to almost 30% quickly. So that's pretty resilience. We will see with Mathieu. That's incredible. That's very interesting. And we will see with Mathieu how we can bounce back and how the Voie Maritime has addressed this pandemic situation. Mathieu?
Yep. So for our organization, well, in fact, something I didn't mention directly in the slide, but we never interrupted the navigation, so we were able to open as normal, which is in mid-March, something like that. And then we operate since that time. But in terms more of asset management, what is very key is to, when you well know the profile, the risk profile of your asset and the condition, the current condition, what it provides you the ability to decide where to focus. Like it's true for the inspection, it's true for the project execution. So as Bernard was mentioning, when you know well your asset, and he referred to the API index. So that's basically our risk profile index for each asset. So that way we're able, with that kind of indices, you can just focus the people when you have less people, focus it on the right portion. The other important point is being well documented and described as a process allow you to send a different inspector or a different assessor and having a similar result. So it comes back to be able to replace the personnel that you may lose during like a pandemic with the confinement. You can have the similar result with different people, which is the goal of the whole system. If we move on to the next slide, it also, the pandemic shed a new light on the risk profiles or even the value profiles of our asset. So it was interesting, like some systems like the IT infrastructure and IS system that serves for the remote operation of our locks, the video conferencing, the remote access. So those systems were not that much important in '94. Not at all, in fact, but they are more and more important. And even with the pandemic, they are kind of critical right now. So tomorrow, when we will have a project for the replacement of a server, there's a new way of assessing. I mean, you have to adjust your value to take into account those new conditions that we are in over time. Some trends observed that were already started, but that helps us during the pandemic is the technology that we've implemented to support the inspection and it's basically gathering the asset information. So we're talking about the drones to do the inspection, the intelligence structure, so a lot of sensors to be able to well know the asset. Those system helps for the physical distanciation for sure, and they reduce interaction of people on site, and you're still able in confinement and remote work to well know the asset. Our last slide, just a quick word to tells you that we are, even if we are there with our asset management system, we are continuing to evolve. We are trying to align with the ISO 55001. And we started that new kind of journey, or the pursuit of that journey with a maturity assessment in 2017. So just to tell you that it's always evolving. And part of it is like the complete asset management plan includes a FMEA analysis to identify the risk of failure and to establish for critical asset a disaster recovery plan. So that's something that we already have, but that we will develop more and more with that alignment. So I guess that's the time that we have, but.
Yeah, well, all in all, a good plan B or resilience start with a robust plan A in asset management, as we have seen from the theory and also from the real case of the Maritime. Some key takeaway today: the asset management journey never ends. It's not a project; it evolves. Best practices in asset management have adapted to operating context of the organization. So it's not only CapEx, it's also OpEx and how the people do asset management. So that's really important. The IAM model is a good framework for applying ISO 55001 compliance template and the use of data and process of the system for more objective and consistent decision making. And better to start imperfectly with a plan A in asset management and draw partial conclusion than to wait for perfection, as we mentioned. And Mathieu, maybe the last word here for the last key takeaway.
Yeah, sure. So the risk management is dynamic. I mean, that's true. So you always have to evolve. You can have a very good framework, but you will always have to evolve with that framework, especially when it's we're talking at defining the values and what is important for the organization. So it always changes. So you have to stay on top of it and continue to evolve with the changing context.
Yeah, since we're solving business problems, or we want to create value for the business, strategy evolves of the business, then your plan needs to be, your system and process needs to adjust. So Bill, here we are. I don't know if we have time for question. It's 13:01.
We did have one question come in, so if you can give a quick answer, we can get through that one, and I'll just read it off for you here. It's, how do you consider the suitability versus the condition of an asset?
The sustainability?
Suitability.
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 So I could give it a shoot if you want, Bernard.
Yeah, go ahead. No problem.
Because the condition of the asset, it's only one portion of the consideration. Yeah. I would say that the suitability is more taken into account when you discuss with the stakeholder. So it's more, because when you assess the performance of an asset, as part of the performance, you will have discussion with stakeholders. So let's take a gate for a lock. So the speed of a gate, I mean, that's important for the operation. So that's maybe, well, I guess a gate it's really suitable for a lock, but let's take other asset, any other asset. When you discuss with the stakeholder, that's where you will see if the asset is pertinent or suitable for the needs of your stakeholder or not. Compared to the asset condition, which is really to define the asset that you have, is it working the way it's supposed to work? It's not exactly the same thing as evaluating the performance and needs.
And if I understand well, if I can add, usually we try to look at an asset performance on three things. So the condition, the physical asset, but the functional aspect of it. So that's a little bit about what you're asking for, the suitable part of it, and then the operation part of it. So the people intervening to the asset, doing the maintenance. So that's mainly how to look at it, the three part.
When you define a critical asset, there's the risk, but as well, which values that asset delivers to the company. That's basically it. So it's part of the consideration, but it's different.
Perfect. Okay, so we are a little bit over time, so we'll wrap it up here.
Do I need to stop sharing?
Getting on mute.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to give a big thank you to Bill, Bernard, and Mathieu for a great discussion today. Thank you to the registrar, the tech support, the e-learning solutions team, those monitoring the chat, and Willow. And a big thank you to all of you for being part of our conversation today. As mentioned off the top, stay tuned for the third free pandemic session that will be held on September 16th. And keep an eye out for more details on our virtual Real Property National Workshop scheduled for November 24th to 26th. You'll hear from us again shortly, and a link to the video playback will be posted on our website by the end of the week. See you soon, and thank you so much for being part of RPIC.
Thank you.
Bye.